It started with strangers in my barn, 3 of them carrying ladders, paint cans, and an audacity so loud it felt like an insult. At the end of my driveway, Susan Harper, the president of Maplewood Estates HOA, stood like she owned the horizon, and she smiled the way people smile right before they break someone's day. By noon, I had chained my gate, called the cops, and watched her truck pull away with people who'd tried to rearrange my life for the sake of a neighborhood look. My name is Tom Reynolds. I bought the little ranch on the edge of Maplewood because I wanted a place to get my hands dirty to fix trucks to build something that belonged only to me. There's a red barn out back, cracked paint, a squeaky hinge, sawdust in corners, nothing fancy, everything honest. It sits just outside the legal boundary of the HOA. I checked the title twice before I signed. Still, within a month, a welcome turned into a war of notices. The first letter was friendly enough on the surface, visual standards, community harmony, but there was a tone to it that made your skin crawl. Susan had handwriting people respect. She had a clipboard. She had an audience. She showed up on my porch like a greeting card, come to life. Short blonde bob, pearl necklace, a smile that never reached the eyes. "Hi, I'm Susan, the HOA president," she said, like she was introducing herself to the clerk at her own property. I said, polite calm, that my land wasn't in their jurisdiction. She made an odd little smile and said, "We'll see about that." After that, notices appeared on the mailbox: repaint the barn, replace the roof, remove farm animals, and then one morning actual workers in shirts with the Maplewood logo were measuring the inside of my barn like it was a community project. My toolbox had been moved. Muddy boot prints trailed through my floor. I remember gripping my coffee so hard it might have cracked. I remember the way she raised a clipboard and commanded strangers to act like it was all authorized. I tried being reasonable. I called the HOA number and she answered, crisp, confident, certain. "Tom," she said like we were old neighbors, "we're doing this for property value." I told her I'd bought the place specifically because it was mine. She sighed, told me the neighborhood aesthetic matters more than outdated arguments about lines on a map, and recommended compliance. Her compliance had a truck and men who knew how to paint a mailbox without asking. So I did what any reasonable person would do when strangers are rearranging your life. I locked the gate. I put up cameras. I taped the first letter to my fridge and started making a file. Dates, times, names. For a week, I felt a small, powerful clarity. The barn was mine. The land was mine, and I would not be altered by someone who thought community standards meant she could march into a stranger's life. That feeling lasted until a truck with a crane showed up in the middle of the day. When the crane rolled down my driveway, there was a moment where the world narrowed to metal and gravel and Susan's smirk. She leaned out her window like she was delivering the final act of a show. "We'll get it done today," she said, and the men climbed out with tool belts and clipboards like a crew assembled for a purpose beyond simple maintenance. My heart turned over. The air felt thinner. I called the police, and for half an hour I sat on the porch holding Max's leash and wondering if I'd have to fight for wood and nails like some bizarre frontier. The cops arrived, and the first officer, good patient man, asked to see documents. Susan showed nothing but an authority built from habit. I showed the county map. The officer read it, then looked back, and for a sliver of a second I felt my chest unclench. He told them they had no right to enter private property without paperwork, and the crew packed up muttering. Susan's face went bright as if someone had flicked off a light. She wasn't used to being told no. That should have been the end of it in some fair world, but it was only the start of escalation. She sent more letters. She sent volunteer workers who would appear with tools and then be working on community standards. She hired a truck so big I could see its shadow from the porch, and at night the rumble of engines became a thing I waited for like a storm you can anticipate and dread. My inbox filled with threats couched as concerns. My neighbors jumped around the subject like hopping stones. One by one I felt the weight of it, as if community opinion could crush a title deed. There was a night when doubt did exactly what doubt is designed to do. It find the weak nail in your confidence and pry. I sat under the bare bulb in my kitchen and found myself asking stupid small things. Did I read the map wrong? Should I just repaint the barn to match the houses down the lane? Would selling be easier? It's a poison of tiny questions. They seem practical until they chip away at you. I remember thinking maybe it wasn't worth the fight. The idea of packing up, of leaving this place because someone else decided it was ugly, sounded unbearably safe. I had a cup of coffee go cold in my hand. Max came and nudged my knee like he knew those thoughts were human and cheap. What kept me from packing up was not ideology, but evidence and an old neighbor named Evelyn Thompson. Evelyn had lived here before Maplewood got its manicured sign. She brought me a stack of dusty meeting minutes, a yellowed packet that had details proving where the HOA boundary really ended. She said, "They've been pushing lines for years to make trouble for folks they don't like she'd seen this movie a dozen times." Evelyn's voice had patience in it, and the patience felt like permission to stand. I started to build a file that would embarrass a small army. Camera footage of workers on my land, copies of every letter they left, recordings of phone calls where Susan suggested negotiation might be more comfortable for everyone. If you can hear condescension through the phone. You can hear clipboard authority like a background hum. Collecting those things didn't make me less scared, but it gave me a plan. The escalation that nearly broke me was deliberate. One night, a massive truck bigger than the ones before appeared. It had a mechanical arm, and the arm looked like something hired for demolition, not paint jobs. My gate rattled under lights that crawled into my yard. I called the police. I called a lawyer. I spoke loudly and clearly into the dark, "You cannot come onto this property." They came anyway for a while, testing the locks like they were toys. The arm swung metal scraping sparks, the sound a kind of threat that vibrates through a house. When the authorities finally showed up in force lights cutting through the night, something shifted. Officers came down with flashlights and law and read words that felt like a balm. "You are trespassing. Cease operations." They made calls, checked maps, and told the crew to leave. Susan's composure crumbled in the glow of those lights. The clipboard looked suddenly ridiculous. She argued, flailed, called on the board as if the board's vote would get her out of a trespass citation. But the law is strangely blunt. Property lines are lines. You can argue aesthetics until the sun goes down, but you can't legally bulldoze someone's barn without permission. They tried a last desperate move. A small machine sneaked in the shadows to pry at the fence while men worked behind the hedges, but Max and the cameras and the fact that I'd learned to speak calm and loud into a night where people do dangerous things, all of it combined. The police arrived again. The machine retracted. I watched Susan's face when an officer read her rights notice, not a dramatic arrest with handcuffs and sobbing, but a documentation I'd wanted, names taken. Statements recorded the machinery and truck logged as evidence. For the first time in months, the person who had always counted on intimidation looked fragile and small clipboard useless at her side. I'm not naive. Justice didn't come as a fairy tale triumph. No choir sang. There was no party. The truck left. The men left. Susan was escorted to a squad car for questioning and citation. She glared at me like a woman who'd lost a private war she never understood. I stood by my gate, exhausted, hands dirty, and felt the strange mix of relief and hollowness that comes when the fight you've been holding tight for becomes something real. I had held my ground, yes, but I had not been satisfied by retribution. I had been satisfied by boundaries restored by the fact that my barn was still mine, by the knowledge that paper and camera and neighbors who remember can actually stop someone who thinks a clipboard equals command. I walk the property now the same way I always have, but quieter with a new wariness. I never celebrated. I don't want to decorate a moment where someone else fell. But I also can't pretend it didn't matter. Standing up for a thing that seems small, a barn, a gate, sometimes becomes how you practice being loud enough to protect everything else. So I lock the gate at night, check the footage, and keep a list of the names of people who stood by me. Boundaries are not rudeness. They are the walls you build so your life has a place to breathe.